Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to our echo room.
I'm gonna hold on. Michael did it.
We good?
Mhm.
Okay, let's try that again. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our December meeting of the Fish and Wildlife Board, or November 30th meeting of the Fish and Wildlife Board. Appreciate all the members being able to make it on such short notice. The first thing I'd like to do, just to confirm this, because we're all online, is to take attendance, so they have an assurance that we have a quorum. So I will call out members' names, and if you could just respond, I'd appreciate it. From Lamoille County, Johnny Dragon. Bob Patterson.
Bob Patterson here. There's an echo.
Yes, sorry. Michael Bancroft, Orange County.
Here.
Neil Hogan, Bennington County.
Here.
Paul Noel, Orleans County.
Here.
Alison Fraser, Chittenden County.
Here.
Marty Van Buren, Rutland County.
Here.
Essex County, Michael Folsom.
I am here.
Washington County, Brian Bailey.
Here.
Franklin County, Jay Sweeney.
Here.
Wyndham County, David Dean.
Here.
Grand Isle, Brian McCarthy. Windsor County, Nicholas Burnham.
Here.
And Caledonia County, Brad Ferlin here. That's 12 members present. Thank you. We have a quorum. The Commissioner, quickly, would you like to introduce your staff that's here?
Sure. Chris Herrick, I'm the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. Introduce our new Wildlife Director, John Austin.
Hello, everybody.
Abigail Connolly. We have General Counsel Catherine Gessing and Major Sean Fowler.
Everybody.
Here.
Online, Reed Furphy and David Sawswell.
We have a few folks online if they want to introduce themselves.
Oh, I'm Mike Wazowski with the Vermont Daily Chronicle.
Just to note, other department staff that are online, not physically present here in this room, David Sawswell, Wildlife Program Manager, and Bree Furphy, Wildlife Biologist.
Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anybody from the public that would like to make comments? We'll start in the room first. Sir?
Yes.
If you'd like to, just stand right there at the end of the table, identify yourself in 2 minutes, please.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rod Coronado from the town of Orange. I represent Vermont Wildlife Patrol, and I trust everybody had a wonderful holiday. I wanted to spend my remaining time to address some comments that were made at the last ALCAR hearing, characterizing myself and other organizations as being animal rights activists in Vermont. I saw that as a disingenuous attempt to try to categorize people who have been opposed to some of the restrictions and recommendations on these proposals as being uninformed or are not validated. And I also want to say that, well, first of all, I want to say that I especially take offense at that because I'm an Indigenous person and my values and principles are built on thousands of years of knowledge on living harmoniously with nature and animals. And so to be characterized as an animal rights activist, I found that to be very insulting. Lastly, what I want to say is I want to implore the board to keep the public process open and try to keep this meeting as public as possible and to not go into executive session and leave the public out of the process again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, okay. Is there anybody online that would want from the public that would like to take advantage of 2 minutes for public comments?
We have a few people. First person is Protect Our Wildlife.
Okay, if you could identify yourself, please. And you have 2 minutes.
My name is Brenna Galdenzi from Protect Our Wildlife. Can you hear me okay? Is there an echo?
No, we're fine right now.
Okay, I guess my public comment is, what is the point of a public comment today before the public even has a chance to hear from the department? The department put out new recommendations less than 24 hours ago, and I was just notified this morning that there was an additional change just about 2 hours ago. So this public comment period is what you're required to do. Sadly, this whole public comment period has never offered the public a way of truly being listened to. There's a big difference between having a formality of a public comment period and actually listening to and deliberating on what the public says. As someone who has worked on trapping BMPs and coyote hounding for the last 2 years as a result of Acts 159 and 165, I've tried providing resources to my board member, Jamie Dragon, who appears to not have read one thing I've sent her, nor does she seem to have any understanding of the legislative mandates. I've watched the board over the last year or two do as little as possible with little understanding of the legislative intent before them. This is not your typical board meeting where you get to just deny a petition. You have very clear legislative mandates that you continue to try to erode. But the upside to this whole process has only further illuminated the reality that the wildlife governance model in Vermont is broken. And I truly hope that the legislature will make some serious reforms, including making this board advisory only or abolishing this board completely. The way the board operates now is nothing more than a private game club. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Second person is Sarah Gorsline.
Sarah, you have 2 minutes, please.
Hello, everyone. Is everyone hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Sarah Gorsline. I'm a Grand Isle County resident. I also work for the national science-based nonprofit Project Coyote, as most of you already know. I just wanted to highlight the fact that some of your funding comes from hunting, fishing, and trapping licenses. However, a large portion of your funding also comes from general funding from the Vermont legislature and also from US taxpayers. You answer to all Vermonters, and your job is to preserve spaces and wildlife into the future for all of us, despite differences on opinion about how best to do that. Council Guessing spoke about larger concerns for Vermont ecosystems due to climate change in her latest presentation to the LCAR committee as a priority above other priorities. Council Guessing highlighted trapping and hound hunting as management tools necessary to maintain healthy ecosystems into the future. I would like to see scientific studies showing that trapping and hound hunting improve ecosystems overall. At Project Coyote, our scientific studies say the exact opposite of Council Guessing. Whether you want to talk about population numbers, the fact that coyotes and other apex predators can expand and destabilize their populations when heavily hunted, or if we want to talk about ecosystem services, that apex and mesopredators regulate species below them in that ecosystem, or if we want to talk about public safety, that education and removal of animal attractants prevents conflicts, whereas baiting of traps and baiting for hound hunting increases human and wildlife and pet conflicts. I agree with Council Guessing that Vermont is changing, with more Vermonters than ever engaging in non-consumptive use of wild spaces. Trapping and hound hunting are historic practices that are considered traditions by some. Tradition is important, but it must also adapt to current ecosystem science, a changing state that requires public safety for all Vermonters, and current understanding of animal welfare and humane treatment of animals. I and Project Coyote, we support ethical fair chase subsistence hunting of animals that can be removed without negatively impacting ecosystems. I continue to question and ask to see scientific studies explaining why this department allows indiscriminate removal of canids, such as coyote, wolves, and fox in the first place, when these animals provide critical ecosystem services. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Ray Gonda.
Greg? You're muted, Greg. We can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, good. Right. Well, what I'm going to do is refer you to an email I sent to each of the board members. I hope you will read that. I support the work you do. I totally disagree with these animal rights people, and I think everybody knows that. I'm a scientist engineer, so the kinds of comments I hear about the Department of Fish and Wildlife not using science is, to me, absolutely absurd. So I hope you will read my comments. I want to give other people the chance to speak here, so I'll relinquish my 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Mike Covey.
Mike Covey, you with us?
Hello, Mike Covey, Executive Director of the Vermont Traditions Coalition. I just want to make a few points. You've got a handful of legislators catering to a handful of animal rights activists, and make no mistake, that's what they are. Animal welfare advocates, as they like to style themselves, would be concerned about the well-being of populations at large, which the hunting and trapping community has stewarded for more than the last century at this point. The board is being utilized as a tool to do what that handful of legislators cannot unilaterally do. So they've created a sense of fear that you need to continually give and give and give to their desires when this is really just a handful of people. But the board has been invested with legislative powers, right? You have the authority to create rules that become law. So as these few people can't do it on their own, what they're doing is utilizing the board as the mechanism that does the work for them. And I just want you to all be very cognizant of that as you look at this today. What's been done with this has gone so far above and beyond the understanding of legislative intent that was presented to the broader legislature, that at this point, these rules are already arbitrary and capricious on that basis. Today should be just a straight, simple no. There's nothing more to give. There's no more need or value in giving. When we hear comments about how the department somehow needs to prove a lack of harm or prove that these grandiose claims of the animal rights activists are false, that's not accurate. Nowhere in science or in law do we seek to prove a negative. If these folks can show that this is somehow genuinely injurious, then they need to prove that. We need to stop trying to prove that there's no harm, because you can't prove a negative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next.
I know we have Kel Thomas on the phone. Kel, if you could press *6 at this time, you can make your comment. And we're gonna wait a second just so you can get to it.
Hello.
Hello.
I'd like to address this issue. I'm not in favor of the coyotes whatsoever. I think that the state of Vermont has made a huge mistake bringing them into the environment. I am 75 years old. I been in Brandon all my life. I've hunted deer, and along with other things, but I've never seen I object, or I can't see a coyote objecting to a young deer, fawn, whatever, and I think that well, the noises they make are quite eerie. I mean, around here they come in, and it's quite disturbing. And I live close to town. I can imagine what a deer must feel like when they're coming in and it's dark. Let me think. I own about 40 acres and that I hunt on, and that's all I do on it. Well, I did mow hay on it one time, but getting too old for that, I guess. But
Mike, that is 2 minutes, Mike.
pardon?
That's 2 minutes.
Oh, pardon me. I'll hang up then.
Thank you very much. I see a Randy up there. Is that
Yep,
what it is?
Randy Barrows.
Randy, you have your hand up. You want 2 minutes for public comments?
Absolutely, if I could. Thank you. My comments are I would urge the board to stop this process today. Yeah, we've been mandated by the legislature. We've gone through all the facts. The facts clearly show that what we're doing is not incorrect. We got to stop bowing to the few that we've heard from today that are obviously offended by this whole process. I've got the feeling that no matter what we do, they're not going to be happy. And we're just going to keep regurgitating the same stuff over and over and over again. I would urge the board to just put this to bed, carry on with the business that's more important with your time. And I want to thank you all for what you've done to this point. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments at this point?
Nothing.
Okay, seeing none, that will close the public comments period. Next item on the agenda is the proposed amendments to the fur-bearing species rule. And I will now turn it over to the Department of Fish and Wildlife and Catherine to present us with what has occurred since last time we met and since the last votes that we had on this pending rule. Catherine?
So I think, as most of you know, there was a LCAR meeting on the 16th of November, which many of the department staff and I attended. LCAR, the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rulemaking, issued a number of objections, which included objections to the control of dogs and taking coyote with the aid of dogs. So that was relating to section 3.6 and 4.2, which is kind of the directive section of the rules relating to hunting coyote with dogs. In addition, it included an objection to exempting traps set in the water or under ice as contrary to the intent of the General Assembly, and that relates to the definition of well, it relates to the directives regarding setbacks in section 4.15 of the rule. There was also an objection to the definition of a public trail on the ground that it was contrary to the intent of the General Assembly, and the language essentially asserts that it was the General Assembly's intent to include all trails where persons may reasonably be expected to recreate. And then finally, there was an objection to the word hunt in the definition of trapping, which indicated that trapping is a form of hunting, as also contrary to legislative intent. All of those are the contrary to a legislative intent is one of the statutory provisions which allows the legislature to object to a rule. The board was given 14 days to respond to that. That's today, so
Ask you a quick,
Sure.
make a quick comment and you can validate that I'm correct. To take a step back, LCAR, generally speaking, approved the rule as we presented it, with the exception of these four
That's correct.
objections that you're presenting.
that's
So
correct.
aside from these issues, LCAR has basically validated the rule or passed the rule, and if nothing else, the rest of those sections will go into effect. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It remains to be seen what a court would do, if a portion of the rule was objected to.
But from this
but that's-
legislative process and
Yeah.
our interaction with LCAR.
Yeah.
The rest of the rule, as we voted on, has been accepted.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
Yeah, so the department has come up with a number of recommendations. The first recommendation, that we are making is related to sections 3.6 and 4.20, which relates to the control of dogs. In the memos that we've received from LCAR, they were focused on attempting to, it seemed like they were asking for a rule that requires people to keep dogs either within sight or within voice control, sound control. And I suppose being on a leash would do the same thing. The recommendations, frankly, that the department is making do not go that far, and I think are primarily sort of clarifications. The first one is just inserting the words audible tones into the definition of the training and control collar under 3.19. And then the second one is a provision that encourages hunters to ask for landowner permission. And that comes directly from a section of Act 165, which required the board to promulgate a rule that encouraged hunters to seek permission from landowners. It's not necessarily mandatory. We don't actually have the authority to do that. The board doesn't have the authority to do that. The legislature could do that if they wanted to, as they've done with trapping. But this incorporates some of the language that's in the statute already, which prohibits people from releasing dogs on posted land, as well as encouraging people to seek landowner permission before releasing dogs or entering onto land while hunting coyote. And then finally, it directs the department to incorporate permission into our hunter education process.
Okay, so I can just recap that section. We voted on as a board to require the collar, the training collar, to be used in hounding and hounding for coyotes. The legislative LCAR committee, a member of 8, has said that they do not believe that meets the definition of control. And so they've asked us to potentially revise that to better meet their intent of control. What the department is now doing, they're coming back to us and saying, I think that, well, if we were to define control the way you, LCAR, are recommending that we define control, it's really in an effect a de facto ban on hounding, because it's going to be impossible for hounders to control their dogs using leashes or in sight of vision, line of sight. It's impossible to do when you're hounding. I mean, it's nearly impossible. And
yeah.
And so what you've done, you're recommending these 2 changes, but not necessarily recommending what the legislature or LCAR committee has recommended.
Correct. And the board could do something beyond that
Right.
if they wanted to.
Okay.
But I think we've been pretty clear in our testimony that we view the kinds of control that LCAR is suggesting to be a de facto ban, and that it would significantly undermine the ability to actually have a successful hunt because of the nature of the activity. So.
And I think that, if I remember correctly, I don't have the language right in front of me, but I think the acts that were passed, one of the intent that we needed to make was to make hounding for coyotes safer.
It was to reduce and minimize landowner conflicts. So reduce the possibility that coyotes will go on people's land where they're not welcome. That's one thing. And then also sort of reduce the potential for harm to people, pets, livestock, and the like, private property.
And then, so one more comment to that. I listened to the LCAR hearing. And at the end of that hearing for this particular section, if I remember correctly, the attorney, the legislative counsel for the LCAR committee stated that an argument could be made that what we have included in our proposed rule to LCAR, in fact, reduces the chances for those things to happen. That she can make an argument that we have met the intent of the law. As well as making the other side of the argument as well too, but she could easily make an argument for both sides of whether or not what we've done with this rule meets the intent of the law.
I don't remember her exact words, but you know, I think she did say something like that.
Okay, board members, I think what we're going to do, we're going to take each one of these sections from beginning to end. We know what the objection was from the LCAR committee, and we know what the department is recommending for a potential change to us. And so I think we as a board we'll review each one of these sections and decide what we want to do on a section by section basis. So we'll start with the control of dogs. Based on that conversation, does anybody on the board have a comment relative to this section? Brian?
I feel that we should leave it as we presented it, as was presented to LCAR after the last meeting.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Neil Hogan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I actually have no problem adding the tone that isn't audible for the dog, that alerts the dog. But I did, other than that, I found something from the Vermont Veterinary Medical Association. And I'm quoting that. It says, over the past 5 years in Vermont, over 550 children were treated at hospitals for bite wounds. So, and that doesn't include non-treatable bites. So Catherine mentioned, I think in her response, that probably over the last 5 years or so, there have been a handful of incidences where the hounds have gotten themselves in trouble with people or livestock. I think we have a far greater problem with pet-owned animals, dogs, than we do with the hunting dog. And the other thing I found, which was interesting, is it says Stop the 77, and it's from thefamilydog.com, and it says 70% of dog bites come from the family or friend's dog. So I really think this issue, although we've done an awful lot to get control of these hounds, is, in my opinion, is done. We've done way more than is necessary.
Thank you, Neil. Paul? Paul Noel?
Yeah, I personally don't have a problem with the additional recommendations the department is putting out today. adding tone option on an e-collar. Most of those, that's on almost all e-collars anyway, and encouraging coyote hunters to ask permission on unposted land before hunting, I think, is a good idea as a recommendation. So I personally am okay with what they're offering today.
Any other comments? Michael Colson?
Yes, thank you. A really important thing is, from my perspective, is 2 long years of going from 0 regulations that were generated from any incident where there is an altercation that creates stress between the consumptive user and the public is very important. And I do not want to diminish that, but the numbers are tremendously small. And over the last 2 years, we have gone from 0 regulations to an extensive amount of regulations that the coyote hounders are in agreement with. So when we look at how far we have moved in the direction to meet the directive, we've come light years. And I think that what we have is sufficient. It's beyond sufficient. I think our intention has been honorable and respectful. And I encourage the board to accept what has been put forth to the public and to LCAR. And I want to thank Catherine for her research, because she's done a PhD level amount of work looking at the laws and the intent to preserve the heritage in the state of Vermont. Thanks.
Brian McCarthy is up next.
That is Brian. Okay, Brian McCarthy.
Thank you. I just want to add that the 2 changes to this one clause really don't seem to me to be any big deal, but I don't see any necessity to it. I feel as though what we've already submitted and agreed to should be sufficient, and that it should stand on its own merit, and further changes, I think, are unnecessary and obstructive.
Thank you, Brian. David Dean.
Let me see. I also would like to congratulate our attorney for the presentation and being specific in addressing what the legislature has brought to us in the form of those questions, and answering each, if you will, in its order. Careful about assuming what an attorney says is what the legislature is saying. It's just a caution. Attorneys say all kinds of things to try and get everybody towards the middle. That does not necessarily indicate that the legislature is interested in moving towards the middle. But that said, I think this is an appropriate response to the concerns. I am still concerned that we have heard from dog handlers in the sport, not dog handlers outside the sport, and that there may be other and further responses that we could make. Having said that, I will support the position paper that Attorney Guessing has prepared for us.
Thank you, David.
Can I just say one thing?
Catherine? Absolutely.
The second provision, 4.20.7, that's something that was brought up early on by Legislative Council. It was the first memorandum that we got. And when we came before the board for our private previous meeting, I actually forgot to put that into the recommendation at that time. And that comes to the reason why we're recommending that is because under Act 165, there is language that says provisions to encourage persons pursuing coyote with the aid of dogs to seek landowner permission. And so the reason why we're making that recommendation now is because we had intended to make that recommendation previously, and it does specifically answer a specific provision in Act 165. So that's all the only point I wanted to make for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Now, I would just like to add that I don't believe that our goals and objectives are dissimilar with that of LCAR and the legislators who wrote those bills. I think how quickly we get there or how we get there is really what we may not agree 100% on. But I think we as a board are taking the steps that we think are one that will allow this activity to continue to happen, but yet provide regulations for it that one starts to give us the information that we need around properly regulating it. And secondly, moving it in that direction that the legislature has asked us to reduce those encounters with landowners and the public and damage to property and so on and so forth. This is not the end all be all, and that we feel this is moving us in that direction. And I believe that if we find, as you were saying, Dave, that there are other resources that we find that would allow us to move this in a better direction, to continue to move it in a better direction, that we as a board won't hesitate to take those under consideration and amend this law this regulation rather, if it makes sense to. So I'm comfortable with what the department is recommending and knowing that it's not the end all be all, and that in the future we can continue to strengthen this rule and this regulation if it makes sense to. So with that said, if there's no one else with any other comments, I would entertain a motion to move on this recommendation.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Michael Bancroft. Okay, so all those in favor of the recommendations put forth by the department on section 3.6 and 4.20 under the control of dogs section signify, and those, we'll take a roll call vote, excuse me. For those of you that are in support of accepting the recommended changes as made by the department, a yes vote will show that, and if you're opposed, a no vote will show that. Is everybody clear on that, or have any questions about the intent of the yes or no? Okay, I will start with Bob Patterson.
Yes.
Michael Bancroft.
Yes.
Neil Hogan.
Yes.
Paul Noel.
Yes.
Allison Frazier.
Yes.
Marty Van Buren.
Yes.
Michael Colson.
No.
Brian Bailey.
No.
Jay Sweeney.
Yes.
David Dean.
Yes.
Brian McCarthy.
Yes.
Nicholas Burnham.
Yes.
Yes. Brad Berlin, yes. Yes. Eleven. Yes, yes. Jamie, I see you are now here.
I've been here the whole time.
I'm sorry. So, roll call vote?
It's a no.
No? Okay. That would be 11-3.
We are getting a little bit of feedback from some board members. If you could just please only unmute yourself when you're about to talk, it'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that is 11-3 in favor of accepting the changes as proposed by the department. Now moving on to the definition of public trails. Catherine?
I think as the board knows, LCAR objected to a portion of the definition of public trails, which was under 3.14B. The objection essentially stated that it was not consistent with legislative intent and essentially stated that the definition of public trails should include all trails that people might be reasonably expected to recreate on. You know, we made a minor tweak. I don't know that it has a lot of substantive effect, but it will make it less, it does, one of the reasons why we're suggesting the making the recommendation that we're making is that the words on the ground were a little bit confusing, and we did get some feedback from law enforcement that if we eliminated that extra verbiage, it would be a clearer rule. Just to be clear, we're sticking with public trails, which is consistent with the language of Act 159.
Okay, board members, any questions? Does anybody understand, not understand, or have any questions around what the issue on this particular section is?
If I might, the definition now. The definition now is maintained and clearly marked.
Correct.
That correct? That is the only definition relative to a public trail.
Well, there are two other sections in the definition, but those sections were approved by LCAR. Those sections included any trail that's mapped on public lands, and also the Long Trail, the Vermont Rail Trail, and the Appalachian Trail, which we discussed at our last meeting where we voted, I think, where the board voted to approve those. So really, we're only just focusing on that subsection B that was supposed to be more of a, was supposed to address those trails that were not mapped.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
And the objection from LCAR, just so I'm clear on what they're, I mean, it's clear what your recommendation is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to be a little clearer myself on what the objection of LCAR was. They wanted this definition to include anywheres where people would be likely to recreate. Is that what I understood?
Let me pull up the language because it's not crystal clear.
It was
to
very
me.
vague.
Yes.
It's
Very open-ended and very
fairly
vague.
vague, but they did use language, all trails where people might reasonably be expected to recreate.
is very difficult to define.
That's one of the concerns, especially since, most of our statutes related to enforcement are criminal in nature. And, the Vermont Supreme Court has struck down statutes, the application of statutes that are too vague, such that a reasonable person wouldn't be able to tell whether or not it's a public trail. So.
Okay. So let's start with Brian McCarthy.
Thank you, Brad. I believe very strongly that we've already got too broad a definition of what these public trails are, and that further restricting it would be not only far above and beyond what our mandate was to provide for, but it would essentially make hunting and trapping impracticable in much of our landscape. And I would be seriously opposed to further restricting this.
Thank you, Brian. Brian Bailey?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not sure if it's more for Catherine or who, but I want a little clarification about trails on private land. Am I correct in assuming that they're talking about these restrictions on private land only on land, on like the Appalachian Trail, the Long Trail, and the Rail Trail? Are those the only inclusions where those trails are on private land? The same restrictions apply, or is this any trail on any private land?
So, the way that this subsection B is drafted, it says on municipal lands, Vermont state-owned land, or federal land within the state of Vermont. The other sections that were previously approved by the board included the Appalachian Trail, the Long Trail, and the Vermont Rail Trail.
Okay.
Now, some of those are on private land. There is a very small percentage in Vermont, very small percentage of private land that is traversed by the Long Trail and the Appalachian Trail, in part because those trail systems have been in existence for a long time, and they've worked really hard to get specific rights of way and acquire lands to put those on. So most of those trails are on public lands. The Vermont Rail Trail, on the other hand, does go through private property. It's also subject to railroad easements, which infringe on those private properties in and of themselves. Most of those rights of way are, they vary depending on, what was going on and what the deal was with the railway at the time. But they're usually at least 30 feet on each side, if not more.
But to point his question, Catherine.
Yes.
Aside from those, this doesn't apply to private land.
No, it does not. It applies to public land.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, but I would like to bring up a point. Elkar's statement about these restrictions applying to any trail where anybody might reasonably be expected to recreate. That is a very vague statement. I mean, my family owns a fairly large chunk of land, and there are trails all over it, and people recreate on those trails all the time. And under that statement, those trails would fall under these restrictions. I think that's a very vague statement, and I don't see how it could possibly be expected to include private land. But under their statement, It definitely could include that. I mean, we have miles and miles of trails, and I certainly don't want it to fall under these restrictions. I guess that's it. Thank you.
No.
So
This-
Brian,
This does not expand, trails to private lands.
we agree.
Yeah, I mean, the department's doesn't. I was just making a statement about the elk carriers.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
No, no, that's fine, Mike. That's fine, Brian. Thank you. I think Michael Colson, if you still have your hand up.
Yes, I do. So during this whole process, I actually had a constituent. I've had many people reach out to me. I've realized this has become a full-time job. Thank God I'm retired. But that said, while this person was out in the woods, there were blaze marks on trees. And does that constitute a trail? Because even though those blazes were there and you could see two in a line, you would have needed a weed whacker or a pair of pruners to open that up enough to even think about going in and setting a trap. He brought up what I thought to be a very real concern, given the fact that anything that we pass that does not eliminate the fact that that blaze mark, which could have easily been from 50 years ago, would put a legal trapper within violation of the law. And so what it comes down to is, are we over trying to regulate an aspect of trapping when in fact the work that we have done for 2 years has met the mandate? And I think that that person deserves an answer to that question.
Michael, I would just, I'll let Catherine respond to my reaction to that trail that you defined clearly was not managed or maintained, and therefore would not be considered under this section of the rule.
All right.
It would also depend on whether it was on.
Michael, can you, never mind. He's muted.
Are we muted now? Oh, no, that's not. Okay. Okay. It would also depend on whether it was on private or public land. Because this regulation only applies to public land.
My understanding, it was I keep getting unmuted. My understanding from this person was that it was on public land. So it brings up a concern. It's a red flag to me, but I put it out there because you're asking for input.
I have lost all sound.
Hear us.
There we go.
I can hear you.
All right, good.
Anyway, I was just reminding you, Michael Colson, also that we are striking the as a trail on the ground with blazes from the definition of this section anyway. So I think there's a lot of things here that would indicate that that particular trail you're talking about does not fall under this particular section.
Okay.
And as with any violation, it's really going to be fact specific and it's going to be dependent on, you know, the work of the wardens and, you know, their assessment of those facts.
To work under the definition of where any individual could be assumed to, could be expected to recreate. It just seems so troublesome to work under that guideline. Because there might be whatever, it provides us no clarity to what we're trying to work with and what we're trying to define here. And I think that would just open us up to a lot more issues than what we're proposing here. So I am perfectly fine with what the department here is recommending and not moving in the direction that the legislative LCAR committee at this point is recommending. That I think personally that is too troublesome at this point.
So Brian Bailey is next, just for the order.
Brian Bailey?
I guess I don't have a big problem with the minor changes they're making. I question whether it's necessary or not, but I have no reason to oppose them that I can think of.
Brian? Michael Bancroft?
Yeah, so I'm fine with what the department is suggesting, considering it marked as a trail, but I could even see, to Mike's point, that even a fresh cut and used logging road could be considered a trail in this definition.
Again, it's on public land.
Thank you, Mike. David Dean?
Sorry, my computer froze.
Got you now.
I thought you did.
Yeah, I am comfortable with the language because the standard of managed and maintained is it may end up being a fact specific case, but managed and maintained is an understood concept. And I think that if there are spurious actions taken against a trapper in violation of this section, that the courts would quickly fall down on the side of the trapper. So I'm comfortable with the language being offered. Thank you.
It's Jay.
Jay Sweeney, and Jay, just before you make a comment, I just want to just remind people that 3.14, we have already approved 3.14. And all we're really talking about is just striking on the ground with blazes, tags, or signage and adding as a trail. So that's really the only change that we're referring to here. The whole section as a whole, we have voted on and approved the remainder of it. So Jay?
Well, in addition to the underwater or under ice.
Eventually, yes.
So my questions for Catherine is, how long do we do this dance back and forth? I mean, we've sent it to LCAR, come back for little changes and stuff. You know, I think we've reached the point where there's really not much more we can do. I mean, this is what we have come up with for a recommendation, batted it around, spent 2 years working on this. You know, at what point do we say, hey, this is what we're presented, take it or leave it? And then what happens?
So that's a great question. We are required under the statute to file a written response to LCAR today. And so after this meeting, we will file that response. And And then LCAR will make a decision as to whether or not they are going to persist in the objections that they've made, amend them, or withdraw them. It's really up to them. I think that they will probably make that decision at their next meeting, which is on the December 14th. And then the board and the department can decide whether or not they want to, depending on what the objection is, whether they want to file the rule in its final form or not. You can withdraw the rule, you can file it, you can amend it. It's up to you. And at that point, I think we're done. Although, who knows? There might be some litigation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Before we call on Michael, I just want to clarify, Michael, that when you're not speaking and someone's responding to your question, if you could mute yourself, because the feedback we're getting is from you. So if you unmute yourself to speak and then immediately mute yourself while everyone responds, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, you're up. Michael Colson.
I would be interested to, I've got a couple of things I want to put in there. I'd like to hear from Sean and from the warden team with any of these finer points. Do you foresee not being able to do the work that you do? Does it hamper you in your perspective from law enforcement? Is it going to be impossible for the trapper to continue to pursue a legal trapping situation?
As far as enforceability, this rule is complicated, but I would not consider it significantly more complicated than many other rules that the wardens already enforce. We'll figure out how to enforce it. As far as making it onerous on the trapper, I'm gonna have to ask a trapper their perspective on that. I can't tell you that. You know, as far as the trail setback, the only thing I'll say to you, Michael, is read the entirety of what that paragraph says and don't get fixated on the end of it, because there's a lot more to it. So the example that you gave without actually seeing it, I don't think that would fall under what this says, because it wasn't designated as a recreational path. Doesn't sound like it's maintained and all of those things. So read all of that, but the wardens will figure out a way how to enforce these.
I guess the second piece that I have is that all of this has fallen upon the trapper who, by and large, I know most of the people in this room and at this meeting know that they are above and beyond reproach in terms of wanting to be in compliance. And maybe this is nitpicking, but not, I don't want to use the word insignificant, because anytime something happens to a member of the public and their pet, that is significant. But we know that the percentage is much less than 1%. And there's no mention of the responsibility that that pet owner has. I own a pet. I waited till I retired from UPS to own a pet because I got bit by so many dogs in my job, and was not going to be part of an irresponsible pet owner. My dog has a collar on all the time. And if that dog smells a partridge on a walk on a dirt road and leaves my visual contact and should, God forbid, get caught in a trap, I would be angry. I would be upset, but I would have to come home and look in the mirror and say, where did I fall down on this? And it would be my responsibility. that I did not keep my dog within sight of myself. So I'm only bringing this up because I do feel that if you're out for a walk in the woods with your pet, you need to keep it under control. So I'm throwing that out there as an important part of what I think we're going to see no matter what we do. And thank you for listening.
Okay, any other, Michael? Excuse me. Sorry, Michael Colson, I jumped the gun on that. Michael Bancroft.
I'd like to make the motion to accept 3.14, the definition of public trail, as the department has suggested, adding the words "as a trail."
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to accept as presented, 3.14, and I have a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, seeing none, I will take a roll call vote on section 3.14. A yes vote is to accept the changes as presented by the department. A no vote is to reject the changes as recommended by the department. Jamie Dragon? Jamie, I think that was a no.
That's a no.
Okay. Bob Patterson?
No.
Michael Bancroft?
Yes.
Neil Hogan?
Yes.
Paul Noel?
Yes.
Allison Frazier? I think Allison had to step out. Artie Van Buren?
Yes.
Michael Colson?
No.
Brian Bailey?
Yes.
Jay Sweeney?
Yes.
David Dean?
Yes.
Brian McCarthy?
Yes.
Nicholas Burnham?
Yes.
And Brad Ferlin is yes. So the yeses have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No's 1, 2, 3. 10 to 3. Yeses have that. Okay. Next section. Moving on to section. Are we moving on to section 3.13 or 3.4?
It would be both 3.13 and 3.4, but it's in the context of the trapping setbacks,
Okay.
which are under 4.15. So I don't know whether we want to talk about the trapping setbacks first under 4.15. The objection from LCAR was that exempting traps under, set in the water or under ice are not consistent with legislative intent. And so the department is recommending removing those exemptions but changing the application of setbacks from all public highways to only class 3 and class 4 roads. Those being, class 4 roads are specifically mentioned in Act 159. And class 3 and class 4 roads seem to be the ones that, most people are walking on. They tend to be the more rural and neighborhood type roads, as opposed to state highways and US highways, Route 100, Route 2, that kind of thing.
Okay. So a class 1 highway is a federal highway?
No, they're all town highways. 1, 2, and 3 are all town high. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all town highways.
Okay,
Um, they are really, the classifications are really based on what the road standards are for the town. Class 1 are the ones that have the most stringent road standards. They tend to be paved roads. They tend to be higher speed roads, connectors with, between, state highways and US highways. 3 and 4 are oftentimes gravel or dirt roads. Class 4 roads are roads that most towns do not maintain. In other words, they don't have to plow them.
Right.
Even if somebody lives on them, they may maintain culverts and bridges on those roads, but the road standards are much less stringent. Those roads tend to be narrower. They tend to be in neighborhoods as opposed to, the main thoroughfare that's going through town.
so a class 2 road is likely to be paved, but yet not the most traveled roads in a particular community. Is that what I'm trying to understand really what a class 2 road is? To
Yeah.
better understand what the exposure is on a class 2 road versus a class 3 road.
Yeah, it's they tend to be paved. Somebody from, these are all municipal highways that are designated by the town. And they, under Title 19, they're all subject to differing levels of road standards. So,
Okay. Michael Bancroft.
So I know at last meeting, the board was almost in agreement with the removing the exemption for traps set within 50 feet underwater or under ice. And I do feel adding another definition and sending it to LCAR is only going to create more responses from them. So I move that we do not follow the the department recommendation, and we stick with what the board rule that we presented or sent to LCAR last time with public highway defined and an exemption for traps underwater and under ice.
I'll second that
Okay.
motion.
Okay, we have a motion to disregard and not accept the recommendation of the department on this section and to stay with what was submitted in our last submission to LCAR. I have a motion and a second for that. Any comments on that? Paul Noel.
I guess at this point, no, I guess if that's the motion.
Brian Bailey, your hand is up.
Yes, I'd like to, a little comment about the exemption for underwater or under ice trap sets. I'm opposed to opposed to including those in the new rules. I feel that a good portion of underwater or under ice sets are right next to roads in culverts and where beavers cause a fair amount of problem. And I find it very hard to believe that underwater sets or under ice sets pose any risk whatsoever to the public or to their pets. And I feel that that definitely should not be included in our recommendation to LCAR.
Thank you, Brian. I see any other hands? Paul?
Yeah, let me just clarify. Yeah, I am totally against the recommendations that is being put forth by the department today. We have addressed the setback issue multiple times now, made multiple changes, multiple compromises. The exemptions should remain in place for water sets. And when I say a water set, open water or under ice, those traps should not be subjected to the 50-foot setback rule for a variety of reasons, which I can go into if need be, but I won't take up the time. And I guess that's it.
Paul, David Dean?
I'd like to ask a question. This section, what's its relationship to someone who's doing nuisance trapping? Because in fact, if a town has a block culvert and they want the beaver out, they're going to be trapping in close and they might use a water set. So I'm just curious what the relationship is to nuisance trapping. Is there an exemption or?
Yes, under 4828, nuisance trapping by landowners and towns are exempt from the rules, except for specific portions of the rules that are applicable. And setbacks would not be included in those, in the group that of rules that would be applicable. In other words, a landowner, a town, or somebody who's trapping for compensation to address a public infrastructure issue or, a threat to private property would be exempt from the setbacks.
Thank you. With that information, the whole notion of it would be a restriction for trapping for nuisance, I think, goes away. And I would alert the board that this particular concern is one of the list of 4 that the LCAR sent back specifically for us to address. I think to strip this out, and several members have spoken about all the work that's gone in and the time that's been spent. I think stripping this language out at this point is a bigger risk to all the work and time spent on this than anything else that we've dealt with yet today. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Paul, before I call on you, I would just like to make a comment that, David, thank you for bringing up nuisance trapping, because I think that that's a distinction that is not made often enough when we have a discussion around trapping incidents. And recently there was the conversation and there was the unfortunate situation where a dog in Castleton was caught in a trap, underwater trap. That was not done during trapping season. That was not done under any of our regulations. I mean, we could have made this, we could have had 100-foot restriction, a 200-foot restriction. That would not have protected that dog. Nuisance trapping occurs more often, outside of trapping season. Trapping season occurs in, I think, the 4th Saturday of October, late into the winter, when people are less likely to be out recreating and walking with their dogs, close to water. And I think we, or Elcar and others have to understand, the more trapping and animal control that we push toward nuisance trapping, on one hand, that becomes more of a risk to the general public than our regulated trapping that we as a board is trying to regulate. And during the months of June, July, August, and September, when people are outside recreating more often, out enjoying the leaves in the fall, I mean, that's where we have had most of our incidences is during nuisance trapping. And so I think we need to make that distinction. And anything that we do here as a board to have this offset as big as we want it to from land, it would not have prevented a lot of the incidences that we have incurred over the last, the few incidences that we have occurred over the last few years with pets. So that's just, I think, just the point that I wanted to make. Paul Noel?
Yeah, that was a good point, Brad. We do want to encourage in-season trappers to harvest like beavers. If they don't, then we are encouraging nuisance trappers and discouraging the ethical harvest of beavers for food, fur, and casture. But I just want to comment the value of having that exemption for traps set in water from the 50-foot rule. Typically, trappers stop at crossings wherever a trail or a road crosses a waterway. There's a culvert or a bridge. And these are natural pinch points and funnels for fur bearers such as mink, muskrat, beaver, otter, and raccoon. These are the perfect places to set water traps for these animals and off their blind sets, and which is the safest of all trap sets a trapper could use because there's no bait or lure, and the chances of catching a non-target animal is very, very low. All of the species that are trapped where roads and trails cross waterways is precisely, again, where most of the water trapping takes place. To eliminate that, the 50-foot setback would eliminate that option for trappers and totally change the dynamic and effectiveness of water trapping in general. So that would be a huge hindrance to trapping, to even consider that type of change that is being proposed by the department right now today. Thank you.
Okay, just a reminder, we do have a motion and a second on the floor to reject the changes. But Brian McCarthy, you're up.
Thank you. I pretty much just want to reiterate what several other people have said, but so that it's fresh in everybody's mind before this comes to vote, is that, first of all, class 3 and class 4 roads, of which there are thousands of miles of, tend to go through very wooded rural areas where trapping is likely to occur. The biggest point I have with this proposal from the department is striking the exemption for underwater and under ice has, as far as I can see, no practical value whatsoever, except to further hinder trappers. It's extremely low risk to the public, and it is indeed the place where probably most samples that we use for biological research, for instance, come from, and they're the best places to trap. I think taking that opportunity away to keep traps underwater and under ice near these roads is wrong. We need to absolutely not lift this exemption. I think it's silly.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, seeing no other hands. Paul, you still have your hand up. I don't know if that's from before or if that's an additional comment you have. Okay. Okay, so seeing none others, let's remind that a yes vote will be to reject the changes to section 4.15 relative to setbacks that has been presented by the department, and that we maintain the position that is reflected in the previous version of the rule that was submitted to LCAR. I will take a roll call vote. So a yes is to reject the proposed language, and no is to disagree with that rejection. Jamie Dragon? Bob Patterson?
Yes.
Michael Bancroft?
Yes.
Neil Hogan?
Yes.
Paul Noel?
Yes.
Allison Frazier? Marty Van Buren?
Yes.
Michael Colson?
Yes.
Brian Bailey?
Yes.
Jay Sweeney?
No.
David Dean?
No.
Brian McCarthy?
Yes.
Nicholas Burnham?
Yes.
Brad Ferlin is yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is 10-3 vote in favor of rejecting the recommendations that made by the departments. Okay. And finally, we move on to section 3.2. Catherine, if you can walk us through that.
In some ways, this is the simplest one. It's removing the word hunt from the definition of trapping, which would currently the rule reads trapping means to take or attempt to take a fur-bearing animal with traps, blah, blah, blah. We had inserted the word hunt. Trapping means to hunt, take, or attempt to take fur-bearing animals.
I have a question, just for clarity. Were we trying to bring the rule and make the rule consistent with law and consistent with the Constitution? Or were we just trying to change the definition to not change different or independently do something that isn't already recorded elsewhere?
I mean, I think we were just trying to clarify that it is our position that, trapping is a form of hunting. It doesn't necessarily change any of the substantive requirements in the rule. So.
Okay. What was the basis of the rejection for LCAR?
Again, the language that they used was that it was not consistent with legislative intent. And that's because I think they lifted the original definition of trapping out of our rules and put it in Act 159. They did not include the word hunt. So that was their argument.
Michael Bancroft?
The legislature instructed us to open up the fur bearer rule, and I see adding the word hunt to the definition of trapping as a housekeeping item. And I feel like LCAR objecting to us adding hunt to the definition is somewhat petty. So I move to keep the definition of trapping to include hunt.
I'll second that.
Okay. I have a motion.
Brad,
Yep. just a reminder, just there, we have a motion and a second to not remove the word hunt from the definition of trapping. Any other comments relative to that motion? Bob?
Yeah,
Patterson?
Brad. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I looked up a dictionary, meaning, and hunt is included with trapping. So I see no reason to change this. It is what it is. And I don't feel that we here in our state should be trying to change what is generally known across the country and across the world. So, and the other thing too is it's been a little bit hard for me because I'm on a phone. I'm unfortunately not at a computer. But one of the things I got out of the LCAR meeting when was really telling to me is that when we had one of the committee members state that he thought the board went above and beyond with all of our regulations, and everybody has their own opinion, whether that's how they feel or not. But I just thought that I just felt that there's no reason for us to keep making changes when there's somebody there that really understands what we were trying to do and what we've done. So just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Michael Colson?
Yes, and thank you. This is a critical point that this, I've said this before, this meeting would not be even taking place if tens of thousands of years ago, before firearms were even in the picture, trapping in one way, shape, or form was the reason that we progressed to the point where we have language, and we are the alpha animal on the planet. It's really important that the public understands that what we do, by and large, is ethical, part of our heritage, and something that needs to continue to exist. And frankly, it's one of the few things left in this world that provides us with a sense of purpose. And so I think that it's vital that this be included in the wording, because it is a sense of hunting. And if we take it to the nth degree, fishing is a form of hunting. It's much more difficult because you're not seeing what's even below the surface, but you are in fact hunting for fish. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Brian Bailey?
Yeah, I agree with Michael Bancroft that I feel it's kind of I don't know that I like the word petty, but it is a petty change. I don't think it's going to make any difference one way or the other. But trapping is definitely a form of hunting, so I think the word should stay in there. That's it.
Thank you, Brian. And so, Catherine, I hate to put you on the spot here, but I have another follow-up question. I agree with Michael that I think this is what we are trying to do is to address some housekeeping issues. And we are trying to do something with this rule that has probably been something that we wanted to do for a while, but we just didn't have the rule open. So my question is, if we were not to do that in this at this point in time, and because LCAR has rejected it, and we happen to open up this rule again on our own a year from now, would the department then make the same recommendation to add that change? Because the time would be more appropriate. It doesn't seem like anybody is questioning whether or not it belongs here or not. It seems like the question from LCAR is more the timing of it and the relevance of it to the particular law that we're responding to. I don't get the sense that they're disagreeing with whether it belongs in here or not. So
I'm gonna stop. I don't want to put the general counsel in the position
Okay,
of answering a hypothetical question.
okay.
We can't answer that question today, but you have a motion,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah, no, I understand. I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to. I just, the department has made this recommendation, so I'm just trying to get a sense whether or not you agree that it belongs there. And
I will
it's
say
relevant.
this, I think the Constitution, the discussion is going to come up whether trapping is hunting. And we are responding to Elcar's objection.
Yep.
But I think you all have stated the case.
Okay, thanks. Okay, with that said, I don't see any other hands. So the motion on the floor is to reject the change and to have the term, the word hunt, remain as it was presented in the version that we last submitted to Elcar. So a yes vote would be to not make any changes to that section and leave it as initially presented. A no vote would be to you want to strike the word hunt. Jamie Dragon?
Yes.
Oh, she said yes.
Is that a yes, Jamie?
Yes, that's a yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Bob Patterson,
Yes.
Michael Bancroft,
Yes.
Neil Hogan,
Yes.
Paul Noel,
Yes.
Allison Frazier. Allison is out. Marty Van Buren,
Yes.
Michael Colson,
Absolutely.
Brian
Brian
Bailey,
Bailey,
Yes.
Jay Sweeney,
Nope.
David Dean,
No.
Brian McCarthy,
Yes.
Nicholas Burnham,
Yes.
Brad Ferlin, yes. That is a 11-2 vote in favor of rejecting the change of striking the word hunt. Okay, so those are the actions that we needed to take on those 4 recommendations. So if you can again remind us what the next steps are, you will respond officially today.
Yep.
To Elcar with what we've just voted on.
Yep.
And we will then wait for their response, whether or not they remove their objections or whether or not their objections remain.
Mhm.
And at that point, remind me what we do.
Well, at that point, we have, the board has the right to proceed with the rule over and above the objection. Or you can withdraw the rule, or you can, you have other options or decision-making points.
So you're responding today. The board is likely to, Elcar is likely to take this up at the December 14th meeting.
Correct.
And we will know on the 14th or the 15th or the 14th, how they respond to what we have now submitted.
Just to be clear.
Yep.
We are responding. Catherine is on behalf of the board.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to gauge whether or not we as a board can take an action right now or whether or not we're going to need to call another meeting sometime in December to respond to this. It's to respond to whatever Elcar does, or whether or not we say this is it. I mean, we don't want to ping pong this back and forth from now until eternity. That we've now given you, what our last position was twice now. And I don't know that we have made substantial changes since the last time that we submitted our response. But I'm just trying to gauge what you who was it? It was Jay who asked the same question.
Yep.
You know, when does this become final for us?
Yep, it becomes final when we either withdraw the rule or file it with the Secretary of State's office.
Okay.
I mean, I think it is up to the board, but I would recommend that the board meet again, at least briefly, after LCAR makes a decision, so that we have that information before you have that information before we take action. And you know, it may seem kind of onerous, but I think that makes more sense than trying to predict what LCAR is gonna do or not having the full information about what I mean, it may be that once they write up their objection, they'll have a little more information in it. I just don't know, because what happens is that if they continue to object, that objection will follow the rule wherever it goes. So it will be certified with the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, and if we, as a board, after that meeting, chose to submit the rule to the Secretary of State's office, how long does it take from the time we submit a rule to the Secretary of State's office for it to become officially implemented as a rule?
It's there's a 15-day waiting period. Sometimes we also set a date certain, but it has to be beyond that 15 days. So it becomes effective within 15 days, or unless we decide that we want it to start on a date certain, which is something that we sometimes do just because we don't want to change rules in the middle of a season or whatever.
Okay. David Dean?
My memory is failing me, and I believe it's hunting with hounds that there is a hold on until a rule is developed. So as far as hunting with hounds goes, that comes to a screeching halt if the rule is not adopted.
There's currently a moratorium on hunting with hounds, and until the board passes a rule.
Hunting hounds for coyotes.
Yeah, for coyotes.
Right,
for coyotes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that, thank you.
Any other questions from board members at this point? Okay, so we will wait to see what happens after the next LCAR meeting. And we will, depend on the department to notify us all on what the outcome of that meeting is. And then we can decide what our next steps are. And go from there. So, hearing no other comments, I'd like to thank everybody for being able to get together on short notice and to take one more look at these this rule and addressing these objections. Excuse me.
I'd move to adjourn.
Well, just a minute. I'm sorry. There is one more agenda item, number 3. There's a commissioner's update. Commissioner, do you have anything that you?
Very brief. One, I just wanted to make sure everybody met John Austin, the wildlife director. You'll be seeing more of him as we move forward. And I would like to thank you all for coming together on such short notice and giving this the attention that it's due. We're very near the finish line, and I appreciate the hard work, the attention that the board has put in. This has been a long haul. I'd also like to acknowledge the tremendous work of the General Counsel, Catherine Jessing. I don't think anyone here, aside from maybe me and the major, understand the amount of work that she has put into this. And it's been tremendous. So I just like to professionally thank you, Catherine, for everything you've done. With that, I'm done.
And on behalf of the board, we say the same thing. Catherine, thank you very much for all your guidance through this process and bringing us along. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Okay, first and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it, meeting adjourned.
Infinity. My gosh.
So how do you close it? Right there?